Welcome to our second week for the implementation course. Last week, we discussed about the digital patient that allows the patient to see themselves in a different perspective, enabling them to understand the proposed treatment. The 2D smile simulation is a starting point to your pre-planning. It is mostly used to motivate the patient and better understand the patient's wishes and desires. It is a great tool to deliver a visual message to your patient that needs to understand what the final result will look like. This week, we are going to talk about the treatment plan that allows you to transition from a smile simulation to a 3D design mockup. Using the automated 3D design workflow, we are going to create a mockup in about 10 minutes based on the smile simulation and the intraoral scan. In the end, we are going to export our mockup design and test drive the mockup in the patient's mouth. So let's get started. Open the SmileFy app on your preferred device, and let's select the menu on the top left corner of your screen. From here, if you're using a Mac computer, you should have the same orientation screen. However, if you have an iPad, you can actually change the screen to landscape mode. So I'm going to show you here under account. If you're using an iPad, right next to languages, you should have an option to change the orientation of your screen from portrait to landscape mode. I don't have this option here because I'm using the Mac, but if you're using your iPad, you should have this option. Now, let's get back to a new case and select new patient. Let's select patient digitalization, and we always start with the full smile picture. This is the only mandatory picture that you need. If you select the plus sign, you should have different cloud options for you to upload the files. So for today, I'm going to use Finder, which is iCloud. Apart from that, you also have SmileFy Drive, Gallery, Dropbox, and Google Drive. As a plan B, if you don't have any pictures of your patient and maybe the patient is not able to come back, then you can also design a mockup with a virtual patient photo. And so if you select the virtual patient here, it should give you this face, and you can use it to create your mockup design. Now, this is not ideal. We do not recommend to use this every time, but in case you don't have any pictures, you can use the virtual patient. If you select the X here, it should give you the option to delete the picture. And I'm going to upload the right picture. Now scroll down, and under intraoral scan and 3D objects, we should upload at least the iOS scan maxilla. If you have both, even better. We have occlusion as well. So let's upload both scans. Additionally, apart from the cloud options that you saw previously, you also have the direct connection with Medit, 3Shape, and Align Star. So if you have one of these three, it allows you to import the files right from your scanner. All you need to do is to add your Medit account, for example, and once you access it, you should have the files to download. Now, I'm going to use iCloud again. Upload the upper first, then the lower, And if you select the icon, you should have a preview of the intraoral scan. Now notice that my intraoral scan is open. It doesn't have a base. It means the files are not ready to print. You do have the option to export the files closed as well. If you export them closed, you don't have to close them in the SmileFy app. So I'm going to close the models in the next step. And for that, we need to select Calibrate first. In this screen, you need to make sure that the model is oriented frontal. So in this case, for example, this is good enough. I don't have to make any changes, but let's say your model is small and maybe is rotated like this. Okay, all we have to do here is to zoom in with the plus. Then select the red line. It should turn yellow once you select the line. And then rotate the model frontal. If needed, you can also balance both sides. And the last one, the green line, it's for the midline. Make sure that is oriented correctly. That's it. That's all you have to remember. Make sure that the model is frontal. Select Save after that. And now we are going to close the models. Now, let's say you have them already closed and you have a base. In that case, you just need to select Keep Original and you'll skip this specific step. However, if you have the models open, we are going to select Close Mesh, Optimize Files. This will reduce the size of your files. You have the size here available to see. In case you need to take a look at the size, I would reduce it a little bit. And then for Analyze and Fix Errors, I also analyze the models to make sure that they are clean. Once we have these three, select Process. It takes about 1 minute here to close both models. Once it's done, you should have the option to select Done. And now that we are in the second step, calibration, just wanted to show you that the models are closed. Okay, and similar to what we did last time, I'm going to set 3 points on the picture. Usually it's the canine, one of the centrals for number 2 and the other canine. So set these 3 points more or less close to the incisal. And now we're going to follow the order from left, number 1. So I'm going to select it here, number 2 about here, and the last one, number 3 about here. If you have these 3 points selected, on the right side, you should have the Calibrate blinking option available. If you don't see it, maybe you are on the iPad and you have it in portrait mode, you will need to scroll down until you see the Calibrate option. Select Calibrate and check the calibration. It should be 90% done here. If you scroll down, you can use the slider to take a look at the overlapping. So this is close enough. In the second quadrant, we can improve. I'm going to use the position, and it seems like we need to increase the size of the intraoral scan. For that, you can use the plus to increase it slightly. I'm also going to bring it a little bit more up so that it matches the gingival margin here, and rotate the incisal anteriors down. Okay, give it some time. You can pause the video here to calibrate the file. Once you have it calibrated, select the digital patient on the top right corner and take a look at the occlusion. The occlusion here should be good. And before we jump into the 3D design process, I want you to pay attention at the occlusion here, because we need to have a plan, right? We do have the smile simulation. That is our reference in terms of length and proportions. But then in terms of occlusion, we need to take a look at the upper and lower intraoral scan. And so if I look at this case specifically, you can see that when designing the case, we will need to bring out the incisal edge of the two anterior teeth so that we can create some space here. And so you'll need to always take a look at the occlusion before going next. Now select the option here on the bottom, next. If it's a new patient, add the patient's name and then save the case. Now back to our case management. And here we need to wait for about 1 minute. The files at the moment are saving to the cloud, and once we have the files saved, we should have the automated 3D design and the simplified mockup available. So as of right now, we just saved the files, and as you can see, it's not available. Both of them are not available. But as soon as the files are ready and saved to the cloud, you can select and start the automated 3D design workflow. So here, give it, I would say, 1 minute. It also depends on the internet speed. So for me, it's always 1 minute, but for you, it might take a little bit longer. It really depends. So let's just wait. You can pause the video here, and then we can continue. Once the files are saved to the cloud, it takes about 1 to 2 minutes until you have the automated 3D design and the simplified mockup available. If you're using your iPad, you can select the slider and move it to the right until you find the two icons. Based on the patient files that you saved, you can start a project from up here. So let's start with the automated 3D design workflow. Select the icon and here select yes. We want to create the automatic mockup based on the digital patient. Remember, the digital patient includes all the files calibrated. Select yes and wait until all the files are downloaded from the cloud. Now this is the first step of the automated 3D design workflow, and here the AI already selects the occlusal curve for you, but it gives you two options. The first option is ideal, which keeps the symmetry on both sides of the arch. Usually it takes the side that is wider and it will mirror that side on the other. The second option, match the patient's curve, keeps the existing occlusal curve of the patient. So if you have a pretty good arch form, and even though it's not symmetrical, you can keep the existing occlusal curve. Now I'm going to select the second option, so you'll have to select up here, choose select curve. And now that we are in this step, you can scroll down, and here you have a slider, so you can take a look at the occlusion with the lower teeth. You can also bring the model closer. Okay, and now let's take a look at the occlusion here. As you can see, we have not that much space, especially in the second quadrant here. So what I'm going to do is I will try to bring out a little bit more the anterior teeth so that we can create some space. And this case specifically, it's an additive case, but you might also have subtractive cases. And so what we want to achieve, depending on the type of design that we are trying to design, you can select or set the occlusal curve slightly differently. So to give you one example here, if we are going to do an additive mock-up with the occlusal curve, we want to bring this incisal edge, the red line represents the incisal edge of the new teeth design, a little bit more forward so that we can create a fully additive mock-up. So all the teeth will be covered. Now, on the other hand, let's say if we want to do an ideal design and we have some areas that are subtractive, let's say here and here, then we want to keep the ideal position as much as possible of the teeth. And in the next steps, you can also digitally prep these areas of the teeth so you can export an ideal design. And later on, you can also import the prep model to create the provisionals based on the ideal design that you already started. Let's start with the additive mockup. So for an additive mockup, we are going to bring the occlusal curve a little bit more forward, and I would say this is good enough. And then for the posteriors, if you want to keep the symmetry, you can select the symmetry option here. And whenever you adjust the targets, you'll see that both sides will be selected so that you can keep the symmetry on both sides of the arch. If you don't want the symmetry, you can remove it and you can adjust one side only. Now that we have the occlusal curve set, we are going to move next. You can use the arrow on the bottom right corner . And in the next step, we are now going to customize our mock-up design. We can select a different template. We can adjust the position, the length, the number of units, and fine-tune our design before exporting it. Let's take a look at the layout for a moment. You can see that we have a slider right below, and as a default, the app gives you the 4 views option. But if you need to change the view, you can select the free view. And if you need to select only the upper arch, next to the views slider, you also have the option to select the upper, the lower, and both. Okay, now the app as a default also gives you 10 units for the mockup, and you can decide to adjust the number of units. Now let's go back to the 4 views. Especially if you're at the beginning, I would recommend you to keep the 4 views because you have the picture as a reference, as a start, and you have the free view here that you can change and adjust. You also have a 12 o'clock perspective and an occlusal view. So here you can also lock the model in place if you want to, so that these two views do not move, and you can select every single tooth individually. And now that we have the position of the teeth, as you can see, 70%, if not 80% of the work, it's almost done here. Now let me give you a different variation. Let's say we want to adjust the number of units and we want to include the 4 front teeth of the lower. For that, we are going to select the tools option, select the teeth chart, and you can now deselect the premolars or maybe select the molars here if you need to, and we're going to add the lower teeth. So this is how you can design the upper and lower teeth, or just the lower or just the upper. If you were to do just the lower teeth, you still have to go to the entire workflow, which is calibrating the intraoral scan, upper IOS scan, the picture. You will still have to set the occlusal curve for the upper arch, because according to the upper teeth position, you then get the position of the lower teeth. Okay, so it's important for you to understand that the workflow, it's actually the same, no matter if we are designing the upper or the lower or both. Now on the upper, there is really not much adjustments that we need to do here. I would say it's good enough. But then on the lower, we do have to make some adjustments. So I would start here, and I can use the arrows to bring it out. In tools, if you scroll down, you also have rotation arrows. You can also use the position tools that we have here, or you can use the arrows that you see on each tooth. Once you select it, it should turn gray, which means that you can now adjust the position. Apart from this, you also have the rotation. So instead of using the rotation arrows from here, you can use it from here as well. So you can select and change the rotation. You also have the scale option, so you can actually scale the teeth here. If you scroll up, you have a feature that is called reflect size, and what this feature does, it allows you to select the tooth that you want to reflect, and once you click on reflect size, the other tooth will be reflected. So let's do it one more time. Select this one, and you can see that the proportion of this tooth was much bigger than the other tooth. I would say we're almost there. We need to maybe adjust the position a little bit better here. Okay. Let's check this from the back as well. Yeah, in terms of height, we are good. Maybe you can bring this one a little bit more higher. And for each group, position, rotation, and size, you have the option to keep the symmetry or keep the left and right side linked. And what that does, it allows you to select one tooth only and the other tooth will be linked, so you can move them together at the same time. And this is great if you are trying to do some changes on both units instead of doing it one by one individually. Okay, bring the upper. Now that we have the position, upper and lower teeth, we can select the templates option, and in templates you have two options to choose from. One would be to select the templates, and you should have a preview with the templates in color, and for each you can select and take a look maybe at the morphology, texture of the template. You can also scroll through the different templates like so, and if you find a good variation you can select it and see if it works okay or not. Now let's say you like the templates for canines and laterals, but you would like to adjust the two centrals. Maybe you want a more square template. You can choose the option select, and this will give you the option to select only certain teeth. For example, if I like the JCP, the first option here on the top, I can select these two templates and everything else will stay the same. And this is great if you want to mix and match different templates. These templates are from Jan Haito, from the Jan Haito library, except the first one, JCP. Now, some of these templates have already a good thickness, they are thick enough, and other templates like this one, you need to increase the thickness. So let's go back to tools, and under rotation you have the size option. Again, I'm going to link the left and right side here, and then with the depth I can increase the thickness. Okay, so I can cover the whole tooth surface like so. Okay, let's do it for the canines a little bit as well. All right, and I'm going to make some rotation as well, some position. So this tooth, the canine, requires more width. Okay, again, if you don't like the canine here, or if you want to have a different variation, you can change it in templates. So we go back to templates and we can choose a different canine. Okay, I think this one looks better. It's more rounded and feminine. Okay, and I still have to bring it more lingual here. Okay, now in design we have an option called smile analysis. So let's go to smile analysis now, and here you'll find the same facial flow concept that you find in the smile simulation, along with the reference lines. If there's any cant, you'll see it with the reference lines. So here, for example, I would say we can adjust the rotation slightly, but it's not a big cant, so we can make some adjustments. So let's go back to tools for the adjustments. And instead of adjusting the rotation one by one for each tooth, you can go to options. So right next to tools, you can go to options, and if you select the group option, if you turn it on, you can now select all the teeth together. And going back to tools, I'm able to now rotate this is good enough. Let's go back one more time to smile analysis. Just double check one last time. Yeah, okay, we have them at the same length. All right then. Now let's go back to tools so that I can show you the last adjustments that you can do. Okay, now let's select the 3D layers, and in 3D layers you should have the slider for each STL file. So here you have the maxilla STL model. You also have the original file, which is the file initial OBJ file that I uploaded. If you want to preview it with colors, you can scroll down and you have a 3D light and colors option here for you to turn on, and you can now preview the color with the design. You can change the color variation here, maybe increase the brightness, reduce the color intensity here. Okay, so you can take a look at the design with color, and then whenever you are done, remove the 3D light. You also have the maxilla and the mandible. Here I can remove it. Okay, now if you want to measure how much length we are adding here, for that you need to go to advanced, and in advanced you have the cross section. Select the cross section, and for this specific cross section analysis, make sure that your free view model is frontal, so it shouldn't be rotated like this, but it should be frontal. And then you turn on the cross section analysis. Now you should have a cross section for each and every tooth. You can scroll down and use the slider for you to slide through each tooth. So this is the central, number 8. And if I need to measure, you can scroll up. You have a measurement option. Select the measurement, and now I can measure from here to here. So it's almost 11 millimeters in length, which is good. Now let's check the thickness of the veneer. It's 0.9. If you need to delete and try again, you can. So here I'm going to measure again. 0.8. This should be 1. Yeah. So for each tooth you can measure. It is also great for gingivectomy if you're trying to measure how much. For example, here we're going a little bit over the gum contour. So again, if I want to measure, it would be from here to about here, which is 0.4. Now, of course, in this case, we're not going to do any gingivectomy, and I will be removing this extra part. But it's a great indication for you to understand how much thickness we're adding for each tooth. So this is 0.2, almost 0.3. If we were to do a composite veneer type of restoration, you need at least 0.2 millimeters of thickness. So it is important to measure. Okay, and at this point, if the position of the teeth along with the proportions and the templates that you selected are good, the last step that you need here is to use the mesh editor tool. And for mesh editor specifically, we have the incisal adjustment wax-up. This is part of the latest update. And what you can do is, especially for a mock-up design, you can delete all the palatinal area that you don't need. And if you want to delete one by one the palatinal area, you can select the tooth and then apply, and in a couple of seconds you'll have the lingual part deleted, just like that. So here, let's apply for the central as well, and you can do this for every single tooth. So this is one way for you to adjust the lingual area. The other option would be to select all teeth. So if you're veneers only, you can select the option all teeth and then apply, and then again you should have all the teeth edited, and this will save time when designing our mock-up or even for composite veneers. Okay, so this is how it looks like. Still some adjustments that we can do. We can add, whenever the template didn't fully cover the existing tooth, it doesn't necessarily mean that we need to prep this area. It simply means that we have to customize it to our existing teeth. So here I'm going to add a little bit more with the brushing tool now. And inflate is for you to add, flatten is to remove, deform is to stretch some parts of the teeth, edges is to cut. This is very nice for the gingival margin if you want to make it nice and clean, and smooth is to smooth out the surface. So let's start with the brushing tool inflate, select it, and for the iOS maxilla, depending if you are doing just the upper or just the lower or both, you can actually select for the iOS scan the maxilla and the maxilla design if you're doing just the upper, or if you're doing just the lower, select mandible with the mandible design. Now, because I have both upper and lower, I'm going to select all of them and then select done. Okay, and as you can see, we have both models now. I would like to separate them so that I can work on the upper first and then the lower. For that, you can use the two arrows here, and we should have the two models separated like this. Okay, so let's start with the upper first. I'm going to use the brushing tool, select the tooth, it should turn gray, and whenever you hold the selection for the inflate, you should be able to see some changes. So here I'm just going to add. I can also use deform to stretch some parts of the teeth. Okay. You can also use smooth. Now let's select on this side as well, and as you can see, we have all the teeth additive. Now if you scroll down, you can also use the transparency for the design, and in case there are some areas where it's slightly additive, it's going on top of the gum, you can adjust it. So here I can use the plus, so I can zoom in, again hold the plus sign so you can zoom in, and I'm now going to use the flatten tool. Make sure that the intensity here it's at the minimum and that the size is somehow not very big, so that you can focus on the gingival margin area, for example. So here I'm just going to remove this extra part, and here slightly as well. And you can see how much we're adding here. So we need to remove this extra material. Otherwise, whenever you test drive the mock-up, this area will be exactly on top of the gum. And you can also leave it like this if you are trying to do some gingivectomy, then absolutely you can keep it. Okay, once we are good, we can bring back the design, and usually after I remove, I also use the smooth option just to smooth out any parts, and here as well. Try not to smooth the whole tooth surface because you're going to deform the template and remove the texture of the tooth. And still we have to make some changes. I usually smooth out maybe by increasing the intensity so that I can have a smooth transition here. So I like to smooth out this part. Probably here we'll have to remove a little bit more, and here as well. Now let's smooth out the other side. Okay, this one seems to be good. We still have the canines. Here we'll have to remove slightly more. Okay, last one. Whenever you delete or add, if you don't like the change, you can always undo. So you have an undo option here, and then you can try again. Okay, and this is our veneer. Now I'm going to take a look at the lower as well. I have the model of the lower now, and here if you are trying to prep this area of the tooth, all you have to do is to switch on the toggle here, edit model. Just be careful whenever you are editing the model, because you can also edit the gingiva here. So I would suggest you to select the size of the brush smaller, and then whenever you use flatten, when you select now the area that you need to remove, it should turn gray, and I have the option now to remove, and you can remove it all the way until you cannot see. Okay, like this, and you can export it as an ideal design. Once you are done with the changes on the model, please remember to switch the edit model back to off so that you are not editing the model again. And now let's focus on the editing part for the teeth. So here we'll need to add. Okay, here we need to add increase the size if you want to add more. Same option here. If you scroll down, you should have the mandible design, so you can check the gingival margin. This looks good. Again, I do have the option to use smooth if I want to have a nice transition here. And on the back here, we're going to add or remove. Alright, once we are done, I'm going to select apply. And we are now ready to export. Alright, for you to export both upper and lower, next to the menu on the top left corner, you can select the 3D design option, and you'll have to select mockup and shells if you want to export an additive mockup or the shell mockup. Here you can also export the ideal design. And for composite veneer type of restoration, you can see that we have another workflow. And so depending on the type of 3D design or models you are trying to export, you have to select the right workflow. So let's start with mockup and shells. Once you select the workflow, you have now the CAD presets. This is the last step for you to export your design, and you should have under presets the mockup highlighted in red as well as the shell mockup. For the mockup, you will be exporting the model with the design. So let's start with this one first. Select mockup, select the maxilla. Here, if you are doing just the upper, the app should give you the automatic export for the maxilla only. You should have a blue model. Here, when you click on export, if you're using your Mac, you can export it on your desktop. If you're using your iPad, you can first save it on your iPad and search for the folder files on your iPad. Okay, now let's export the lower, CAD presets, mockup, and select the mandible. Here, because I edited the model on the lower, I also have the ideal visualization, which is the ideal design. So whenever you need the prep model ideal design, this is the option that you need to select, and this will be available only if you prep the model. Now I'm going to start first with the original model, motivational first, and if you're trying to export both motivational and ideal, then you'll have to export twice. So here we go back to CAD presets, mockup, mandible, and export the ideal design as well. So here I'm going to just rename the file 3D mockup, and then save it. Alright then, to see the files that you just exported or the files that you created, you'll have to select 3D layers again here and scroll all the way down until you find the generated objects. You'll probably have to remove the maxilla and the mandible design here so you can preview the generated files. We have the ideal mandible design with the editing part. We also have the original model, and you can see, I'm not sure if you can see it. Yeah, this is the part that was edited. We can also change the color if you want. Okay, let's choose a different color here. All right, so you can see this is the original and this is the ideal. Okay. Plus we have the upper. So here if I remove the lower, I can also see the upper. Okay, we're now going to save the case. So let's go to save case. The files are exported. Select save case. And now let's go back to our case management. Here I'm going to show you the end result. After you export your mockup, the model, you'll have to create a silicone index, and then with some flowable composite, you can test drive it in the patient's mouth. Here, you can also use the shell mockup, and that means you will not need the silicone index. We're gonna speed up a little bit so that you can see the end result. This is a case done by Dr. Diogo Alves. And because she's a young patient, we didn't prep her teeth. She decided to go for composite veneers from canine to canine. Okay. And so in the SmileFy app, depending on the workflow that you are selecting, you can also select composite veneers, and the app will export 2 models for you. One model is going to be with every other tooth so that you can do the injectable composite technique, either with flowable composite or with the solid composite. Okay, so here is a short video about the technique where Dr. Diogo Alves isolated the adjacent teeth. Here you can also check the space, the thickness. and the end result, which looks natural. Here is the entire workflow from A to Z. We started the first week with the smile simulation, and then we transitioned to our 3D mock-up design, and then based on the patient's feedback, exported as the final for the lab to be used later on. So let me know if you have any questions. Thank you for watching, and happy learning.